Welcome back to the United Pubcast. It is deadline day and not the January transfer window deadline day or the summer transfer deadline day where we're sort of scoping around Europe for that last minute deal. But owners or potential new buyers are scraping around for the last 12 hours until their final or second bids / final bids potentially do come in. So it is an exciting day and a historic day potentially in terms of how you look at it in Manchester United's future / history or future. And Larry, big day. Obviously, no football. It is on the verge of the international break, which is a bit disappointed as a football fan because all we want to do is watch Manchester United on a weekend. But that takes a back seat at the moment. And ultimately, you can say more importantly than the football, which we can't often say. More importantly, it is the background stuff that is going to rightfully take centre stage today.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. But I still think there's lots of news to dissect. The takeover, is obviously ramping up, and it's massive news for Manchester United. Obviously, the bids are due in. I think it's 9 p.m.
It's about 12 hours from now.
Today. Yeah, so when we wake up, we'll know who's in. They're expecting 6 bids, which is quite interesting. Obviously, Redcliffe and Qatar. Well, we need to stop saying Qatar. I want to treat Sheikh Jassim as an individual, so I will. Sheikh Jassim and Jim Ratcliffe, obviously, both are the bids. There's some report, though, that Jim Ratcliffe is getting some backing from Goldman Sachs, I think is the pronunciation, and JP Morgan. So it'll be interesting to see. He clearly knows because all the reports coming out from the Ratcliffe camp he's willing to take the debt and put it onto Ineos. I think there are very negative impacts that will still be associated with United by doing so. And for that reason alone, I think it's in the favor of Qatar. But lots of news and very interested to get into all of the nitty gritty.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll say good day to some people in the live chat. Thank you. 15 minutes delay. I'm just waiting. As I said, Larry has walked through from trying his latest to get through Old Trafford and get to find his briefcase and approach a bid to Richard Arnold and the Glazers. Larry dressed to submit his bid. Definitely looks like it. Stephen, good to see you, mate, as always. Jamie from Northern Ireland, good to see you, mate. Hope all is well. Chris, as always, good to have you. And Adam as well. And also George in the live chat as well. Good to see you, mate. Eating lads, love the business shirt, Larry. On that, Larry, just in regards to everything in regards to this discussion is going to be Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Qatar and what do we think, the pros and cons, and these discussions sort of seemingly go round in circles, but I think sort of rightfully so. I think our opinions change with a little bit of information and sort of whatever our mood is. You mentioned there in regards to Sheikh Jassim, you're going to treat him as an individual and not Qatar, because I think the lazy thing, or lazy, or it depends how you look at it, we all say it's Qatar's bid. You're at the moment, yeah, okay, the way you've sort of woken up today is, okay, you're going to give him the respect he deserves and say it's his bid. Where do you truly sit on it? And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that that's not your opinion. But where do you sit on it now? Like, we just sort of giving him the respect he deserves and say that? Or are you still deep down, it's Qatar?
Look, there are links with Qatar. You'd be naive to think otherwise. He's the son of the former prime minister. And in the Qatari government structure, the prime minister is almost secondary to the president. So very senior. He is the chairman of the Islamic Bank. You don't get to those positions without having influence, power, connections with powerful people. So no, he's not by association the state, but let's not kid ourselves. He's very much linked with the state. So in saying that, where you can draw the line is his wealth, his association is undeniable, but his motives as an individual could very much be in the best interest of Manchester United. He very much is someone who's been born into wealth, yes, but that's not to say that his motives behind buying Manchester United isn't anything outside of he is a massive Manchester United fan, because there is no. I mean this hand on heart, with all due respect, and this isn't to be sexist. I'm just going to be truthful about it. Tom, do you follow the women's team actively?
I wouldn't say not actively. I watch it if it's on. I watch. I see the results pop up. I know the players. I'm not going out of my way to watch the
right. And that's not a criticism of you. The women's game isn't as big as the men's game at the moment, but it is growing. But he is significantly made a point of investing in the women's team. Now, if we're going to follow Qatar and Qatar's traditional motives, there'd be no motivation to invest into the women's team. I mean, if I was to look at what the Glazers have done with the women's team, they've underinvested. They've almost neglected the women's team, yet they still challenge near the top of the table. So when you put it into that context, his motives, I think, are that of a true Manchester United fan. He wants the best for the club, and he's willing to use his various and endless resources to do so.
Yeah, it's interesting now. Look, Abu Dhabi is very different to Qatar. Well, there are similarities, but there's also the differences as well. You do look at what they have done with Manchester City, obviously been one of the most dominant female teams since their takeover. So I think that is we do have to look at the way Abu Dhabi have done things, and obviously PSG have done well as well in regards to their women's team over the years. But this conversation is sort of going to go back and forth. One Qatar, one to Sir Jim Ratcliffe. I'm sure we're going to touch on Marcus Rashford as well, and any football. So anything in the live chat you do want us to discuss, put it in the live chat and we'll answer your questions. And also please do leave a like on the video. But just going back to Jim Ratcliffe, Larry, you mentioned at the start in regards to him potentially sort of looking at one or two banks in regards to sort of getting a few loans to help get this bid over. Now, how much of that is going on Ineos's books? How much is that going to Jim Ratcliffe's pocket into Manchester United? You make that, and the huge negative there is, well, if he's having to take out a loan or two here or there to fund this bid, what's that sort of going to what stress is that going to place on the club in regards to reservicing that debt or sort of repaying that investments for Sir Jim Ratcliffe? I'm just saying that's seen as a negative, which I fully agree. That is why I'm potentially maybe leaning towards more at the Qatar bid at the moment, because I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think there's a brighter future under Sir Jim Ratcliffe compared to the Glazers. But I still think we might have a hand sort of tied behind our back with regards to the stresses that debt can bring. However, the sort of point I would bring to you in regards to that, now, yes, it is a negative having that sort of extra debt placed on the club, or I know he'll say it's on Ineos, but technically that's sort of still going to weigh the club down a little bit. We all sit here and say we don't need this wealthy owner. We just need Manchester United to be allowed to spend what it makes. So I'm just thinking, when we look at this sort of extra debt or keeping the debt, as Sir Jim Ratcliffe would likely do, he would keep that sort of the Glazers' debt on the club. Yes, that's not ideal, but even under the Glazers' website, well, we don't care about the debt. If they stop taking dividends out and they start investing sort of money back into the club and stop taking money out, Manchester United will survive and even thrive. So I'm just thinking, do you see? Obviously, look, under Erik ten Hag, anything is sort of up in the air. Anything is possible under the Dutchman, but ultimately, is there a bright future with debt, in your opinion? Or potential for a bright future with debt?
I think there is. And I've been on the record with you before, Tom, in saying that I don't view debt as negative as other football fans do. And I understand the connotations that come with the word debt. But if you apply a business sense to debt can be leveraged in tax benefits, which means you can get more money back. Exactly. Chris is spot on. So I think with all due respect to those who constantly beat this drum about debt is not a bad thing if you know how to leverage that debt. So I think it's the rest that
PSG, which the Qatari owners, potentially one of the only clubs in Europe debt-free. Like everyone else, Manchester City, Real Madrid, hundreds of millions in debt. I think the best team in the world, potentially the biggest club in the world. And I'm just thinking it is very interesting in terms, as you mentioned, that the perception of the word.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, again, with all due respect, with people who don't understand why you have debt and why you can leverage debt. I'll give you an example. And I know this isn't a property podcast or how to invest, but if let's assume you've got a home loan, you've made a lot of your repayments, you've had the home loan for 20 years, you're now in a position where you can clear that debt. If you've got an investment property, you actually want to keep that debt, because if you're in a position where you're in a negative gear, or in simple or layman's terms, if your rent, the amount that you get in rent is less than the amount that your monthly repayment is, you can leverage the difference as a negative gear. All your interest repayments, you can claim all of that back. So all the interest the Glazers are paying, they can claim that back. Any costs associated with the football club. So in theory, if Manchester United invest into the stadium with Glazers' money, they could potentially claim that money back. Not all of it, but there'd be a way to leverage that. If you're debt-free, you can't do that. So there are benefits to having debt. With the Ineos case, I mean, again, because cash is not an issue for Sheikh Jassim, and he knows the connotations that come with debt, is they will use that PR to highlight another positive victory for themselves. And the reality is, because they've got that financial backing, they're the only party that is going to be capable of pulling off a maneuver of this magnitude. Chris is spot on. This is about the dividends. This is about the lack of investment with the debt. That's fundamentally the issue. It's not the debt itself.
Do you see there, in regards to two very different business models and potentially sort of ways to go about their business in regards to Qatar, also Jim Ratcliffe? Do you see a immediate path, a visible path that will be different? The way Sir Jim Ratcliffe comes in, how this club looks in a year's time, to the way we would look under Qatar in a year's time, or do you think that'll be very similar paths, or do you think under Qatar we have a new stadium built in 6 months and Sir Jim Ratcliffe's the stadium's built out in the next 10 years? Did you see a visible difference in the sort of short-term future?
There is. The reality is, human beings as a society, not just in football, lack patience. Everything is at the click of your phone now. We didn't have that luxury 10 years ago, but now once you go forward, you can't go back. And the reality is, if someone says, I can give you a super team to fight for the Premier League in 1 year, as opposed to, I'm going to invest in this team thoroughly, I'll give you funds, and I'll have you competing in 2 to 3 years. Well, you're going to take the 1 year option, aren't you? And look, to be honest, if there was an alternative outside of Sheikh Jassim that is advantageous and maintains the ethics of a purchaser that we're all happy with, then I would personally be happy to take that route. But I understand that, particularly, again, United haven't won a Premier League in 10 years. Arsenal look like they might win the title this year. That just grows the impatience. Some might argue we've been patient over the last decade. Some might argue we've been patient for 18 years. I would like to remind everyone, regardless of the circumstances, like good investment prior to Glazers coming in, we won the Champions League under the Glazer ownership. Yeah. We did.
It's sad. Well, I'm not sad. It's obviously a good thing, but it's hard. And look, we do have the outlier of Sir Alex Ferguson, but Manchester United's most successful ever period. It wasn't the treble. It was at that sort of 06 to 09 period. That's where we won everything. Okay, didn't win the FA Cup. The FA Cup was a little bit before that. But ultimately, we won absolutely everything under the Glazers' ownership. Now, that wasn't because of the Glazers. Obviously, we had a magnificent team and Sir Alex Ferguson at the helm, obviously. But the history books will point to the Glazers were in charge in our most successful ever period, which is crazy when you do think about it. Football is a funny old game. But speaking of football, Larry, bring it back in. Now, the discussion will probably sort of go back into the financials and the ownership thing, but bringing it into a football sort of point of view. And there are sort of correlations to Abu Dhabi and Manchester City, as vast as they are in regards to the differences between the clubs. There's no doubt you can look at a big takeover, Middle Eastern money coming in, a change overnight in the club's direction. Jamie brings a point up here, or a question. Do you think we'll potentially, with such a huge investment coming in and virtually unlimited funding, that we'll see a decline in the academies players coming through? Just in regards to what you've seen at Manchester City, let's be lazy and say Manchester United would be run like Manchester City in regards to the way they went about their transfer business and their football department. And pretty much they have done things well, Manchester City, whether we like it or not. They've run a very successful football club. So let's say Qatar would go along those lines. Yes, they have Phil Foden in the team now, and what a player, okay, generational talent, but it's taken them 15 years to get that. So I'm just thinking, do you see now, yes, two very different clubs. Manchester United would be run different to the way Manchester City have been run, especially off the field in regards to the ground. They did have to catch up. But on the field, obviously, we're very proud of our sort of youth history and players coming through. Is that a potential concern, whether it's Sir Jim Ratcliffe's ownership or Qatar's ownership? Is it a potential concern, the future of the club from a football point of view or a football culture point of view?
I don't think so. I mean, let's remember that the club or the company that is being used to back this is called 92, a reference to the 92. If this guy is a Manchester United fan, Sheikh Jassim, which all reports suggest he is, there's been photos of him viewed at Old Trafford, he'll be well aware of United's youth system. And let's not forget, like, when you're a businessman, a successful businessman, you understand what it takes to run a successful business. And that's, you're not going to know all the answers, but you hire the people who will be able to give you the answers. There will be people within all that football. So currently, just because new owners come in, I don't think we'll necessarily see a new chief executive. I don't think it necessarily means the whole executive team will change. He'll bring in his own people, I have no doubt. But the core of the club will still be there. the people in the canteen. You're not going to bring in a chef from Qatar to start cooking Middle Eastern food for the players. I don't think Marcus Rashford will be eating tabbouleh and hummus for lunch. I don't see these things changing at their core. So ultimately, the people in the club will influence the culture. And the thing with Manchester United, which is going to be really interesting, we've never seen a club with the history that United has face a takeover before. So it'll be really interesting to see how they respect the traditions. But no, I don't think youth will be an issue. This is another key point in which he says we'll invest into. I think that there's a long-running standing record, 1937, I believe. So Manchester United, I don't think that'll end in our lifetime, Tom. I think youth will always be at the heart of everything that is Manchester United.
Yeah, definitely. Fingers crossed that is the case. Now, just back into regards to Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Qatar, and so much of the discussion around this ownership and the bids has been PR. Okay, this guy has a class of 92 foundation, or sorry if that's a bit lazy in regards to, I'm not sure the exact foundation, or 92 foundation, or whatever it is, but it's along the lines of founded off the back of his admiration for the class of 92. So much of this has been about PR. Obviously, we're looking at so much of things from Qatar's coming out saying they want to invest in the women's team. Now, they wouldn't usually be saying that, but in regards to the questions directed at Qatar in regards to women's rights in Qatar, obviously they're going to have to counteract that and say, no, we're fully behind that. So there's so much PR, and obviously we did see Sir Jim Ratcliffe tip off the press, or you'd think, tip off the press to get those photo shots outside Old Trafford when he was coming for his Old Trafford tour. You could say that was very positive PR from Sir Jim Ratcliffe's side of things. So I'm just thinking, what do you think Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Now, I have no criticism or no praise of Sir Jim Ratcliffe being photographed out there, but from the club's point of view and Sir Jim's point of view, the reasoning behind that, because Richard Arnold looked very happy to do that. Now, was it just potluck? Obviously, who are you going to photograph? Would the photographers from the Telegraph or the Daily Mail know who to photograph from Qatar? Like, no disrespect to them, but there's no visible face unless it was Sheikh Jassim himself who was there. Who do you photograph? It could just be anyone in a suit. Where Sir Jim Ratcliffe is a visible figure, everyone knows who he is. So it's obviously a far easier photo opportunity. So, okay, we know when he's going to be here. We know what he looks like. We're going to take this photo. So just from the club's point of view and Sir Jim's, him had that visible sort of footage of him meeting Richard Arnold outside Old Trafford. Just your thoughts on it and any sort of reasoning from either party.
It's PR. There's a reason that there was press around Jim Ratcliffe being present at Old Trafford prior to him being at Old Trafford. He wanted it known that he was there to receive the presentation himself. At the end of the day, he knows he can't compete financially. So what then was his ulterior selling point? And that was he's English. He'll keep the Manchester back in Manchester United. Because he's British, he was present at Old Trafford. He made sure the press were aware. He made sure the camera shot was available. And credit to him. It was met with, if you look online, with negative connotations, but it was actually well received by most sensible people because it shows he's cared and he's invested. Whereas Sheikh Jassim's perspective was, well, the Glazers aren't there, so I'm not going to be there. So he's measuring like for like. I have no issue with it. Either way, I understand where Jim Ratcliffe's taking it. I have nothing against Jim Ratcliffe. He was the solution 6 months ago, but because there's a richer guy that's now available, well, now he's the favorite, and suddenly Jim Ratcliffe's evil. I hate the extremes in the fan base. Jim Ratcliffe's done nothing wrong. I think if he took over, he'd do a good job. I think he'd have the heart of Manchester United in every decision he makes. He just obviously can't compete with the financial clout that Sheikh Jassim can. That's the top and bottom of it.
It is crazy, the reaction to Sir Jim in regards to so many people on Twitter, and you could just imagine the people on Twitter typing on their phone, like anyone calling him broke and he has no money. I'm just thinking, we can't say, no one on Twitter is in a position to say that.
He's literally Britain's richest man.
Yeah, but yeah, I just say that the reaction.
What are you and me?
Yeah, that's why I can't tweet that on Twitter. I'll leave that to the kids. But Stephen brings up this point here, and I'll just get you to sort of clarify, because we've not butted heads on this, but sort of have a different opinion, and you maybe have a little bit more insight into. So just explain your position again. But Stephen brings up the point here, which I agree with. The ones who only benefit from the PR is fans and speculation. Surely business ignores what the fans want. So I look at Sir Jim Ratcliffe there and having that photo opportunity, and you're saying that's good PR. And my question is just, And you might have a valid answer, which I'm sure you do in terms of your position on it, and you discuss the share price and everything. But I look at that in PR and think, what does that affect the Glazers? How much is he putting in the Glazers' bank account? That's what they care about. They don't care about, okay, he looked good out there. He wants the best for the club. The fans think this of him. I just don't see how that correlates in regards to him being more successful in a bid.
Yeah, but public perception helps. At the end of the day, when if you are the eventual owner, you want the fans on side, and at the moment, there is a sour taste toward the Glazers. So if you're a potential buyer, reel those people in. You have to remember, social media plays a factor, and again, the share price is impacted. So to give you an example, without getting into, I'm no expert on American shares, but what I can tell you is if the Glazers turned around tomorrow and said, actually, we're going to take a minority stake, I promise you the share price will plummet. The value is sky high at the moment because there's an anticipated sale, which will see the value of the share increase, which means, so let's also remember that there's not just the purchasing of the club. You have to buy out the owners of the current shares as well.
Well, so 31%. What are they? 70% the Glazers, 69%?
Glazers are 70%. So
70%.
So yeah, you're talking about money that goes to the Glazers, sure, but the money that goes to the remaining shareholders needs to be accounted for. And if you're Jim Ratcliffe, who so far it's suggested will not buy out the other shareholders, then the value of those shares do still matter. And if you're Sheikh Jassim, it still matters to you as well because you're going to have to buy them out because you want 100% stake. So this price matters. It's beyond the Glazers. This is a public listed company. It goes well beyond that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if there is anything else in the live chat, we'll ramble on for a few more minutes and discuss a little bit of football and some sort of latest news around Old Trafford. But any questions or topics, do let us know in the live chat and we'll get to it. And obviously, please do leave a like on the video. It'd be very much appreciated. But Larry, last thing on the Glazers, I'm sure it'll come back into the conversation, but you mentioned there in regards to a minority stake and the Glazers. Obviously, it's very likely they're going to sell. Obviously, now the information we have looks like that there are a few bidders in there. Someone put in there earlier, potentially up to 6 or even 8 bids. Obviously, we know the very public too, potentially some type of third bid in regards to investment from the Elliott Group, etc. But ultimately, let's say a hypothetical situation where the Glazers are looking to maybe stay on and sort of just reel in the reins a little bit and sort of stay involved in the club. How much do we have to blame Erik ten Hag? Well, would it be off the back of his job, what he's doing in regards to the brilliance he has brought to this club and the job he's doing, and suddenly there is a bright future potentially on the pitch? Have the Glazers seen something? Hang on, this wasn't here under Solskjaer. This wasn't here under Van Halen, Mourinho. This wasn't here under Ralph Rangnick. Have we fallen upon a little bit of a gem here? And Erik ten Hag will be, not compare him to Sir Alex Ferguson, but the similarities are there in regards to succeeding with your hands tied behind your back. I'm just thinking, have they seen something? Oh, hang on, this guy can actually perform. And if he does perform, what will that do to the sort of club's value? So I'm just thinking, is there a situation, very unlikely potentially, but where they have seen what Erik ten Hag is doing, think, well, hang on, if we hang on, he wins a Premier League title or two in a couple of years' time. Forget 5 billion, we're going for 8 or 9 billion. I'm just thinking, is there potentially that line of thinking?
No, I think the Glazers' position has always been 6 billion. I think with the knowledge that, again, this is something that people aren't taking into account as part of the public factor. When you're in a negotiation, no party starts with what they really want. If you're the Glazers, you start at your highest point, and if you're a bidder, you start at your lowest point, and then you'll eventually land somewhere in the middle. The Glazers have always let out into the media that they want 6 billion. It's now coming out that as part of this second bid that Sheikh Jassim is willing to put in 5.5 billion. Whereas the initial bid was, I believe, around the 5 billion mark. So he's willing to stump up another 500 million. Look at the figures we're talking about. When you say
it's crazy,
wow.
It's crazy when we talk about transfers and okay, it's a 60 million pound player. Someone's on 55 million. You think, I'll pay the 5 million. So here we see 6 billion. Someone's on 5.5 billion. Say, I'll pay the extra 500 million. 500 million. Like it's
That's
crazy when you talk these figures.
When you're talking in billions, because you're removing the 100 word, your brain just assumes it's a smaller figure. We're talking so much money. We're talking about money that could end world poverty. and yet we're putting it into a
Is
football
that
club.
kind of maybe the ship has sailed in sort of every facet of our lives? Forget sport, in every decision we make and every sort of whatever field sort of someone does enjoy. Does it kind of, let's take the moral high ground out of it, sort of thing, but kind of not sadden you, but sort of concern you in regards to that? Looking what's going into Manchester United or going into the Glazers' pocket morally, where that else sort of could end up, that 5 billion.
Look, we're
Yeah, I
a
know.
football channel, and I'll focus on Manchester United.
It doesn't bother
On a
me, but
human
it's just
level,
yeah.
yeah, look, Tom, if someone gave me the option, 5 billion so Manchester United can win the league or 5 billion so we can end world poverty, mate, I'm choosing the latter every time. I'd watch United get relegated down to non-league if it meant we end world hunger. But sadly, that's just not the world we live in.
Yeah, no, it's just when we do sort of mention these numbers, they are crazy and they do get you thinking. But that is obviously a discussion for another day, which I'm sure we'll be having plenty of. Maybe in 12 hours' time, we're going to have a lot of information in regards to these bids coming in, and maybe one sort of steps a little bit closer to getting their name on the door and a few keys. But Boxy, do we have any information on the other 30% of the club or the stakeholders? Are there any significant stakeholders? I'm not sure who owns that 30%. I think it's 31%. I'm not sure. Maybe someone in the live chat does. But they want 6 billion, so each Glazer sibling gets 1 billion each. There is obviously the part of that. Obviously, we just look at the Glazers, the visible ones we do see, but the whole family is involved as well. So obviously they have a huge say in it. They obviously want the money. The Glazers maybe want to stay on, or the Avram and Joel maybe do want to stay on a little bit longer. Steve saying Manchester United supporters, the homeless World Cup, not enough for my liking, but it's a start. Yeah, look, you do look at the questions that are in issues directed, whether it be Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, etc. We do look at what Abu Dhabi have done for Manchester City. And where we can look at motives and sports washing and all this, ultimately the result is the result of good work in Manchester. So I'm just thinking, ultimately, whatever someone's motive is, if it is helping people and helping our football club as a selfish person, we do have to push our sort of maybe questions and issues to the side a little bit.
Yeah, no, you are right there. I don't know. It's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. Let me ask you though. I want to flip this back to you, Tom, because you've asked me a lot of questions, and I want to get your opinion on some of this. Just given the magnitude of what Sheikh Jassim has promised, I wonder, has he built himself an unrealistic? Well, this is the question no one's asking. Has he built an unrealistic house to get some stones thrown at it? Because he's promising a hell of a lot, and I think the expectation is going to come onto him pretty quickly if United have a poor transfer window.
You definitely have to deliver.
But if he doesn't, what are the repercussions? Like, there's so many unique nuances that are intertwined here, and I just wonder, like, let's assume Sheikh Jassim takes over, okay? Let's assume he takes over. What's a successful season next season? Yeah. Because if it was under Glazer ownership, I think we would have said challenge for the title, just be closer in the title race, maybe again get another trophy. If Sheikh Jassim comes in, well, then what?
I think the media perception, well, he's going to be in a tricky position in terms of the perception. I think the media and sort of fan, not sort of normal fans, but the Twitter fan sort of thing, and here we are, we're both on Twitter, etc. But you know what I mean, would be saying we have to go undefeated and win the treble. Ultimately, the owner for me, Erik ten Hag's job and the players' job wouldn't change next year. I'd still be looking at potentially a title challenge and make sure you get a trophy in your bag. I ultimately think it's question to go on and challenge and win the title, but I wouldn't be saying, okay, you won't. Okay, that means we have to win the league. We could buy all these great players.
I'm going to ask you a deeper question then. So Sheikh Jassim takes over. What are your expectations for the upcoming transfer window? What's a figure that you're satisfied with as a transfer spend?
My first sort of question or sort of concern around the transfer window is the logistics in regards to what funds can be made available in regards to the purchase. Let's say he buys the club tomorrow. Sort of what impact does that have financially? Like, when do the keys actually get handed over to Sheikh Jassim? If the deal gets done today, is it still 3 months before he's technically the owner? Like, I'm just not sure when we're going to see visible sort of decisions. Maybe it is literally overnight. Okay, Glazer owners one day, the next day is Qatar. Maybe that is the case. But I potentially do see a situation where that's a long process, where he might not have the bank password during the transfer window. But let's say he is. Let's say first of the transfer window, he has the full ownership and full sort of access to the accounts. Look, it's hard though. I think everyone's transfer kitty is going up every year. If you look at, let's say, our number one target is going to be Harry Kane or Victor Osimhen. So let's say we want to bring in a big striker. Let's say they're going to cost over £100 million, or if not £100 million. Let's say you do want another midfielder. You're going to be looking at anywhere from 60, 70 to £100 million as well. So look, if he wants to go out and win a Premier League title and win a Champions League in that first season, or a challenge for those, you'd be looking at those two key areas in regards to the investment that's going to need. You'd be saying, crazily, you'd be saying £300 million.
Yeah, I think you could be right. You just look at what Chelsea's ownership has done. And I got to say, I personally think, I don't think Chelsea are going to come out as good as they think they will. I think they've really mismanaged this situation. Chelsea, what I think, and I don't want to go too off topic here, but I think the situation with Chelsea is interesting to look at, though, because there is the potential for that kind of situation to happen. I don't think it will, because I think Ten Hag has a stronger hold of the dressing room and will have a say in terms of team harmony, etc. But I think, you know where I actually think it will be interesting? I think we'll see a quicker turnover of the squad. Because money is no longer an object, you'll sell Harry Maguire for 20 million. You'll sell Scott McTominay for 20 to 30 million. You'll be happier to take a loss on these players as opposed to what we've seen under the current ownership.
That has been a huge concern, a huge issue with Man United selling players. They just said, no, it's not worth it, so we're not selling them. And that has been a huge bugbear of mine.
I think that's everyone looks at transfers, and I understand it's the exciting part of it, but I think what you will see is, I think United's turnover of the current squad will be great next season. If the Qataris take over, I would not be surprised to see the likes of Fred, Delot. I'm actually, because if you told me under the Glazers, no way I think those players stay. Now,
does this not give you sort of feelings of Chelsea and Manchester City in the early stage, where it should be a very slow process? And now, yes, there does need to be changes, of course, but you make too many big changes. We saw Manchester City didn't click for 4 or 5 years. You look at the big changes at Chelsea; it's an absolute nightmare. I'm just thinking, okay, let's get rid of all our bad players, bring in good players. That's not maybe ideal for the dressing room. So yes, there might be a little bit of excitement. In regards to what Eric Ten Hag needs, and it is a process. You look, Arsenal's taken a couple of years to get down this track. I'm just thinking, ultimately, that would bring excitement, but is it ideal?
I think it is, because if you look at United's starting 11, so if I look at the 11 right now in terms of investment, I think you probably need to upgrade right back, central midfield, and striker. I think they're the alarming positions. But I think if you get players who walk into the starting 11 in those 3 positions, and you could debate goalkeeper, I think United are rightfully in a title challenge.
Yeah.
That's all it needs, 3 players into the 11. And the players I just mentioned to you a moment ago are players on the periphery of that. So I think what United need to do this summer needs to be 3 players into the starting 11 and improve the depth of the squad. So if you can replace Fred with Sabitzer, so Sabitzer's greater embedded. Let's say Sabitzer's bought for 20 million. He replaces Fred's role in the squad. So so Sabitzer is your more regular player as opposed to Fred. I'd say that's a clear improvement. Yeah. If McTominay leaves, which I think it's heading that way now that the links with Newcastle are gaining some momentum, you upgrade him with Eriksen. So Eriksen replaces McTominay in terms of the bench. Then you've brought in a starting 11 box-to-box midfielder for, let's say, it's Jude Bellingham. So your bench now is Sabitzer and Eriksen as your backup. That's serious quality to come in.
Yeah.
So
this is one of my concerns. Sorry, go on.
No. Go for it.
Yeah, one of my concerns, and look, whenever I'm back into Jim Ratcliffe, whether on Twitter or on here, I'm actually leaning towards Qatar. When my defensive said Jim Ratcliffe or praising him in certain aspects, he's not my preferred owner. I am leaning towards Qatar, but here in regards to a huge concern of my Qatar, it's not the human rights issue or anything that I've gone past that. It is what it is in terms of, but here, this is a concern which I do have Box brings up here in regards to PSG, because that's the evidence we have. Now, yes, okay, this is one individual, of course, let's take that sort of stance, but also be naive to not think it is Qatar. Steer clear of the Galactico windows. PSG are so imbalanced with Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. their bench, their team versus Bayern. They were shocking against Bayern, and it was clearly a result of the Galactic sort of mentality in regards to that front three. They played Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi. It was woeful. They just stood there. They just stood there and did nothing in regards to the defensive. PSG were defending with 6 or 7 players, and I just think that is a concern. Now, yes, if Manchester United is different, if Eric Ten Hag has power, maybe that sort of decision-making doesn't happen. But that is a concern I do have with Qatari ownership. Now, it might sort of result in great football and great success, maybe, but a bit of a concern I have. Stephen brings up a little bit earlier in regards to discussing the high bar Qatar are potentially setting in regards to their promises. He brings up a good point here, just like the few months following a federal election, broken promises, he will need to deliver if he does come in. And there was a comment, yeah, I'll take it here. And it kind of goes into my next point as well in regards to the stadium. If Sheikh Jassim fixes the leaky roof, it will be a start. On the stadium, actually, there's a comment here in regards to stadium. I haven't read it yet, but I've just seen the word stadium. Chris, okay, so 4D chess move here by the Qataris. They will ship over the container stadium from the World Cup, being brand new Old Trafford. So on Old Trafford, Qatari owners, now you can throw Sir Jim Ratcliffe in and say what he would do or what he would do differently. We need a big transfer window. We need all this investment around the club. We need a new and improved football sort of infrastructure. We need investment at the training ground, the youth facilities, the women's team, of course. The stadium, Larry. For some reason, I just want to see whether it be redeveloped or brand new stadium. I want to see it addressed straight away. Now, does straight away mean in the first 2 seasons or in 10 years? I'm not sure what straight away means. But a decision made is probably what I'm also want. Qataris come in. Do you think it's high on the list, or do you think there are sort of, just me as a fan, as Manchester United is my home, so to say, I'm looking at it a little bit too sort of importantly. The new owners would say it as not as important. Like, just your thoughts on what a Qatari owner comes in and how they value the Old Trafford situation.
I think the pragmatic expectation and the pragmatic approach would be you just need to create a plan, consult the fans. I think that's important. If you want a big tick, PR tick, put an open vote out. Invite other fan participation, surveys. I'd be getting feedback from every angle of the fan base to see what's the interest. But I think now that needs to be targeted with the right representation. But it's the fan stadium. So I would personally how do you do this in a sensible way? I wouldn't go to Twitter, because Twitter's full of teenagers who always just want a new stadium, because teenagers just want the new toy, don't they? I would ask the season ticket holders. They're the ones with the most immediate fan experience. Ask your season ticket holders. Ask anyone who's been a season ticket holder over the last 10 years. Invite those who were season ticket holders when they left under the Glazers ownership. Hi, we acknowledge that you're a season ticket holder. We're looking at developing a new stadium. We would love your feedback. Out of these 3 options, what would you like to see? I think it's really important to get the community of Manchester's opinion, get season ticket holders' opinion, anyone who's been a member, international fans. It should be targeted, because, like I said, Twitter's full of batshit crazy people. But if you can get feedback, then share those results back with the fans and say, this is what you've told us you want, and we're going to do this, and give us a timeline for when that's going to happen. All United fans and any fan should expect is a plan. If you see that there is a plan to execute something, the noise goes away. A new stadium won't be built overnight. I dare say that commencement on work on a new stadium wouldn't happen before July 2024. I don't think you'll do it halfway through a season. It's just not feasible. So you're talking about...
You're talking about there. You're talking about all the changes. I'll tell you the main difference you're talking about, where we compare, let's say this is a Qatari owners come and doing all this, and they'd say maybe the stadium's not sort of actually under construction for, let's say, 2 years, 3 years, potentially. But I'll tell you what the difference is you mentioned there compared to the Glazers.
Go on.
The first thing is communication. Come out and tell people what's happening. That'll be the first thing. Whether they don't do it or not, if they come out and talk about it, that is the main thing for me. Come out and, okay, we're looking at the stadium. It's not going to happen for 5 years, but this is why. And have some type of dialogue, some type of communication, because ultimately the Glazers haven't had that. So everyone has been in the dark. We need this. We want this. What's going to happen? We're not sure. Qatar come in, or Sir Jim Ratcliffe comes in. Whatever decision they make, whether we agree with it or don't agree with it, they have to let us know what the decision is. I'm just thinking that is a huge thing. Whether we agree or disagree, I think that's football fans, that's Manchester United fans, that's going to happen. But ultimately, there needs to be direct the first day Qatari owners come in or Sir Jim Ratcliffe comes in, there needs almost a press conference, almost like an Eric Ten Hag unveiling. There needs to be a press conference with the owners and sort of proper, not grilled like questions like Eric Ten Hag was under Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville, not like a press conference like that, but sort of come out and make a statement in terms of what you are going to do. Because that will ultimately, just in regards to the excitement around the fan base, they will get fans on side no matter what they say. No one will be listening to what they say. We'll just be sort of celebrating the fact that the Glazers aren't there.
It'd be the biggest victory lap that any new prospective owner could do. You're spot on, Tom. There just needs to be improvement in communication. And, that's the point I'm talking to here. Let's talk about, really quick point. Look at Chelsea's new owners. Look at, same with Manchester City's owner. Sheikh Mansour, that's his name. Todd Bowley, Saudi Arabia, at, Newcastle. What have they all done? No communication with the fans. I got to say, Manchester City's owner, Sheikh Mansour, they have invested into the community in Manchester. So I'm going to give some credit there. There's new apartments that have been built. They do give back in terms of the community. Some credit has to go there. But if you want the biggest win as a prospective owner, communicate with your fan base. Big victory. Oh, wow, this Sheikh is willing to talk to the everyday Mancunian, willing to talk to fans.
It's not just a big victory. It's an easy one. Just do it. Surely it's just easy. I don't know why I understand why the Glazers haven't done it, but surely just do it. I just think it's such an easy, as I say, tick in the box, gets the fans on side, no matter what you say. Because people are going to agree, disagree on whatever topic, of course. So you can come out and just please half the fan base. That's all you're going to have to do. Because if you do the other sort of opinion, you're going to piss that fan base off anyway. So you might as well come out and just sort of tell the truth. And it will be a huge tick in the box. But it has been a good discussion in regards to Glazers, Qatar, Sir Jim Ratcliffe. I have enjoyed it because I have sort of followed a lot of sort of threads on Twitter and YouTube videos. And the live chats have just been an absolute mess. And so Jim Ratcliffe's broken. Qatar get out and Qatar get in. So Jim Ratcliffe out back to Chelsea.
If I can bid for $4 billion for something and be considered broke, I want to be that man.
But I have appreciated everyone in the live chat. Now, plenty of different opinions and sort of good insights and knowledge, which has definitely got us thinking. But quickly, before we do wrap up, Larry, Manchester United is a football club. There is sort of football at times played on the pitch. Marcus Rashford won't be playing football on the pitch this weekend, which is a good thing. And ultimately, you have to say probably the smartest decision Manchester United have made in and around international duty for the last 10 years. Now, I'm sure it has happened. Van Gaal Mourinho probably has pulled someone out, of course, around international duty, but it has been, especially around Marcus Rashford, it's been such a thing. Does he have to go? Does he have to play this game? Does he have to go to this tournament? Simply, Marcus Rashford, our main man, player in form in regards to our goals. God, international break, here he is going to go sit on the bench for England, come on for 20 minutes here or there. It's pointless. So I think, here it is. It was a big shock to get him. Now, who knows? Maybe he is injured. Who knows? Likely not. But good to see.
Well, I mean, did you see United's presser on it? He's got a knock. He suffered a knock in the lead up to.
Very likely.
Like, how do we justify this one? Oh, he got a knock in the lead up to Fulham's goal. Like, please.
But it is a good thing. Like, how much do you think? Because usually it's just every player sort of dreams to play for their country, and rightly so. You can fully understand a player going there. But with Marcus Rashford, we've sometimes labelled a little bit of a criticism at him because we've said, okay, the manager should pull the player, like Sir Alex Ferguson did. Sir Alex Ferguson used to force his player to pull out. But with Marcus Rashford over the last couple of years, there's been a little bit of a criticism directed towards him in saying, no, he shouldn't have this surgery or he shouldn't go. He should protect himself in regards to he's had some sort of the ball's been in his court at times in regards to fitness and injuries. I'm just thinking, who has made this decision? Do you think Marcus Rashford is maturing? Do you think it's his? Do you think Eric Ten Hag has stepped in? Do you think it's the club? Do you think it's a combination of both? Like, just how do you think this has unfolded? Because a couple of days ago, we all thought he's going away to play for England. Like, this was never we all hoped this was never a potential for Man United fans, but ultimately it has happened, and it's kind of caught us by a little bit off guard.
I'm going to assume this is driven by Ten Hag, undoubtedly, because players want to play football. Have you ever known a football? Have you ever, when you were playing at whatever level, if you're on the weekend, do you play football on the weekend? Have you ever said, oh, there's a game midweek, yeah, I'm not feeling it? Football players want to play football. Doesn't matter what it is, club or country, you want to play football. I have no doubt it's Eric Ten Hag. I have no doubt Eric Ten Hag's had a quiet word with him, and Rashford's probably gotten on board. The reality is, and I could do a whole video on this, and maybe I will do so in the off season, but the international football calendar needs to be revamped. I think it's an absolute disaster at the moment. The Nations League is a joke. There's no investment into that. It's just a cover up to what was the friendlies before. They try to create promotion and relegation. It's a farce, please. England got relegated. It doesn't impact their position at the World Cup. It doesn't impact their position at the Euros. It's a joke. It's absolute joke. So I think they really need to look at the football calendar. If you talk about player burnout, do they play too many club games? Sure. There is money in club football. No one gives a shit about these international friendlies in the middle of the season.
Do you think we look at the players and we say, we just sat here and said, all the players love to play for their country, and of course they do. God, if you're in a position to play, you can only imagine the feel, and we definitely see the South American players in terms of how much they care, and rightly so. Nothing but respect for that. But you say that, is there a case where even the players now, well, we've heard one or two interviews, Rafael Varane has retired, so the international calendar is too busy. That's why I've retired. Do you think players, and now, yes, maybe some players like Lisandro Martinez, Anthony, and those South Americans, and probably Harry Maguire for England, love playing for their country, of course. But do you think there is a sort of a group of players, a bunch of players, a certain category who do sort of not enjoy it?
Yeah, if you're married, have kids, have family around, I would imagine you look at these games in this period, friendlies. I'd rather spend that time with my family. I've been playing football every 3 days since the World Cup ended. Plus, if you went to the World Cup, there's potential you were away from your family during that period as well.
Yeah.
I just think, particularly with the World Cup that just occurred in December, what is the need for an international break in March? It's just absolute farce.
Yeah, no, look, it's definitely, well, ultimately, I don't know if it's been a good thing. I think Stephen brings it up a little bit earlier in regards to, the international break needs to be exactly what it is, a break. It's almost a more intense time.
I would rather have a buy round, an international buy round, or the Premier League has a buy round just to allow players to rest up.
Well, it's kind of like the winter break, which never really, remember they introduced the winter break? did it kind of not happen? I remember they introduced a winter break and I don't really remember what happened with it.
When that happened?
Like last year or 2 years ago or something, maybe a COVID fed, maybe someone in the live chat. Remember they introduced like a 2-week winter break. It was going to be staggered a little bit. Like one team would play 1 week, one team would have the week off. It was a weird situation. I know the World Cup got involved, and maybe I'm dreaming, but ultimately,
I don't remember that happening.
Because
you play in Christmas 2021.
No, because remember Europe has the winter break, like a 2-week break over Christmas, New Year's.
Spain,
but they introduced something into England. Now, again, I don't know how this eventuated or if it did happen 1 year or not sure. Again, in the live chat, correct me. I'm sure this did happen. I just don't know how it looked. But there was a period where there was a 2-week break or a 2-week period where some teams played in week 1 and some teams played in week 2. Sort of like that. It was a little bit staggered. So football continued, but teams had like maybe an 8-9 day rest, etc., rather than playing those backed up fixtures. But again, was that around COVID where fixtures were different and it kind of fell into place? I'm not sure. If I am dreaming, do let me know in the live chat. I very well could be. But Larry, is there anything else in regards to football news? We've touched on all things ownership, which I'm sure in 12 hours' time we'll have far more information to discuss. But obviously Marcus Rashford been pulled from international duty. A few steps closer to Wembley. Obviously, we've got sort of big semi-final against Brighton, potentially an FA Cup final against Manchester City, which would be unreal and horrendous at the same time. I definitely would not enjoy that. Erling Haaland in all that space at Wembley. I definitely wouldn't enjoy that match. But God, could you imagine beating Manchester City in an FA Cup final? That would be an unreal experience. But anything else Man United related that does tickle your fancy?
I hope Bruno pulls out. I hope Bruno's feeling a little bit sore and pulls out of international duty.
Cristiano Ronaldo, look, you can't be shocked by this. He's in the Portugal squad. Just thinking,
he's banging in goals in the very competitive league that is Saudi Arabia, Tom.
But someone said Roberto Martinez is the Portugal coach now, which is crazy. But he sort of said, I welcome him in, which is, of course, Erik ten Hag had to do the same thing as well. So it's interesting there. A few people bring up here, Box remembers that bit of a break. Again, I don't know how it really unfolded.
Is Roberto Martinez the new manager of Portugal?
I saw Martinez. I'm going with Roberto Martinez. Could be someone else. So do let me know. Actually, it shouldn't be Roberto Martinez. Wasn't he managing Belgium? I'm not sure. Do let me know.
Portugal football manager.
Do let me know, because I know the manager did get the sack.
Martinez.
Yeah, so I wasn't lazy. Yeah, Chris here, 21-22 had a winter break in January, February. So a little bit later for Christmas. Yeah, I thought it was Roberto Martinez. And I think was he the manager of Belgium at the World Cup? He got the sack. Portugal manager got the sack. So a bit of a merry-go-round there, which is crazy.
Yeah.
What was the managerial the last thing before we wrap up, Larry? Crystal Palace. So we'll discuss in Crystal Palace as a bit of a sort of whether
Oh,
you want to
right.
define a nothing club or anything. But how would you like to be? We're discussing all these sort of issues as Manchester United fans. Are we going to build a new state-of-the-art stadium? Are we going to have £300 million to spend? Are we going to win Champions Leagues? Crystal Palace. You go from having the oldest manager in the league in Roy Hodgson and the oldest squad, and not quite doing anything, not really taking any strides forward, just surviving, just getting through Monday to Friday. Ultimately, you get rid of that manager, bring in a new up-and-coming manager in Patrick Vieira. You revamp the squad into a young squad and performing quite well. Obviously, 1 or 2 big defeats, but obviously that's going to happen in a competitive league when you're a young squad. To pull the pin on Patrick Vieira, not to say that the right or wrong decision, but to pull the pin and go back to Roy Hodgson, I've seen some stupid football decisions. I cannot get my head. What I would be feeling as a Crystal Palace fan, and that's not any sort of hate or emotion towards Roy Hodgson, but just the decision behind it is beyond baffling for me.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you look at their results, they've been poor.
But they've been playing some big teams. I saw a stat in regards to they've all played all the top teams now, and in terms of their next couple of 10 fixtures, it's all the teams in and around them. And I'm just thinking, and I think Wilfried Zaha, I think there did need to be a bit of some context applied to those defeats. Now, yes, ultimately it's a results-based business, of course, but I would have done this. Would have been Sam Allardyce. I think would have been a better, just for Roy Hodgson's health, for God's sake. Like I think he's 75 or 78
72.
or something.
No,
72.
wait,
He's in his mid 70s. So I'm just thinking the last thing he needs at his age is a relegation battle. Last thing
Tom,
he needs.
they haven't won in 15 games. I mean, like, it's a lot. There's some draws in there, but 15 games without a win.
No, but okay. So get rid of Vieira if you want to sack the manager. Okay, Roy Hodgson is the answer. Well, I'm just thinking, as a Palace fan, how would you feel in regards to just?
I would have kept Vieira personally, and I mean that, like, hand on heart, because the reality is, I hate to bring everything back to Manchester United, but let's remember when Fergie took over, Fergie finished. Roy Hodgson will be considered a relegation-saving manager for set. I was actually gonna make a comment, Stephen, and it's a bit not in the best taste. So if anyone's hearing this, please forgive me. I do have a bit of a dark humor at times. I could see a case where when his soul has left us to the heavens, they might just call upon him from beyond the grave.
Well, what's that not Crystal Palace? I was just talking about Crystal Palace. Is that manager in France who there's a bit of a meme around him. He got the job from Football Manager, and he speaks all these different languages. And when he speaks French, he speaks in a French accent. He went on a fabulous run. I think it was 15 wins in a row. He's a redhead manager. I think he's a West Ham fan, but he's managing in France, one of the clubs there. He's doing brilliantly, and there is interesting. Obviously, the Football Managerial sort of has taken sort of course of its own in the last couple of years in regards to Ted Lasso, obviously, in terms of that show and everything. And it is interesting, but I just feel for Roy Hodgson. I don't think he should be put in the position.
Can we just imagine what that phone call would have been like? Bloke's retired, kicking it. Hey, Roy. How do you feel about coming out of retirement? Fuck.
But you have to give credit to him probably as well in regards to he obviously has a great love for the game and sort of a passion, which is great. And maybe it is a healthy thing for him to stay involved in. Well, I think he's 75. It must be.
He is. He's 75.
75. So, and he's had some career as well. I just think ultimately, if you do look at Graham Potter at the top end of the field, or what happened to Jose Mourinho, how stressful the Manchester United job can be. Crystal Palace, they're in a tricky spot now. I think they'll survive because I think there's far worse teams in the Premier League. But ultimately, if they get drawn into this relegation battle,
I find it really frustrating that football clubs sack managers that quickly. I mean, they're not going to get relegated. They're not going to get relegated. And the thing is, like, Vieira's a young coach. If Fergie can take United to 11th after coming second, well, I think Vieira can take Palace from 10th to 15th. It's fine. He'll survive. And like you said, the average age of their squad, it's a fairly young squad. Yeah. You have to allow room for that. I hope Vieira gets a better gig. I think he's shown enough that suggests he is a good coach.
Yeah, look, well, when he came in, he had a big job. He had Roy Hodgson's mess to fix at Crystal Palace, and he sort of did that. Now they're going through their first hiccup, but that is obviously for any Crystal Palace fans, which obviously not us. We have far bigger issues. No disrespect to them, but yeah, we're talking at the other end of the table and the other end of business in regards to Qatari money potentially coming in and what that does mean. But Larry, we're supposed to have maybe a 10, 15-minute chat tonight. It has gone 55 minutes, so has flown by. Do appreciate it. Do appreciate everyone in the live chat. Has been a very good discussion today. Have thoroughly enjoyed it. As I said, everything we have said might go out the window in 12 hours' time, and we might have a new owner because the bids are sort of due in by 9 p.m. UK time. So make sure you are subscribed because I'm sure we'll be back very soon with the latest updates and potentially sort of iconic bit of historic updates. Who knows? Big couple of days for Manchester United. Fingers crossed it's down a positive path. But make sure you do leave a like on the video. Very much appreciated. There is over 40 in the live chat. If you aren't subscribed, just please do click like and subscribe. That'll be very much appreciated. It'll make the world of difference to Larry and I. And Larry, anything else, mate?
Well, Australia is in the future, so we'll know who the United owners are before you will, if you're not here. So if you want the news before it becomes news, you got to subscribe here. But no, lots of content coming, Tom. Definitely going to look into transfers. I mentioned this to you already. I want to look into some backups for Casemiro that I think United could snap up for a bargain because United need a striker. I think Casemiro is the most interesting one because he's in the peak of his career. He probably has 3 years in terms of still being starting 11 for United. So the backup for Casemiro needs to be crucial. So I want to do something on that. So I think you'll all enjoy it. So if you are new, make sure you subscribe. You'll want to stay tuned for that. But who doesn't like a bunch of Aussies talking on the other side of the world about a club that's all the way in Manchester?
Definitely, mate. Manchester is where our heart is, no doubt about it. So stay tuned and we'll chat to you in a bit. Until then, have a good one and cheers.
Cheers.